Welcome to the Universe of Business and Life podcast. I'm your host, Barbara Patterson. This podcast explores the powerful connection between our inner world and how we show up in the world. We'll delve into the intersection of business, spirituality, consciousness, and personal growth. Through conversations with thought leaders, change makers, authors, and everyday humans, you'll hear real stories of transformation, aha moments, and the wake-up calls that ignited profound change. My hope is that this is not another business as usual podcast, but that these conversations spark moments of resonance, insight, and inspiration, and open you up to new possibilities for your work and life. So let's dive in together and experience the rich, multidimensional universe within. Hi, and welcome. Today on the podcast, I'm joined by Lily Sais, transformative coach and 3 principles practitioner and founder of Peace from Within. Lily's work is a lifeline for those navigating anxiety, OCD, trauma, and ADHD. And as you're going to see in our conversation today, she approaches it all with warmth and transparency. Lily has nearly 500,000 followers on TikTok and a couple 100,000 over on Instagram. She's not only built a vibrant online presence, but also has a deeply connected community that is dedicated to inner peace and healing. Her journey hasn't been without its own challenges. She's navigated the storms of her own anxiety and self-doubt. She's experienced the heady rush of going viral and what do you do as your business grows? And she noticed her own self getting more and more anxious as she was earning more and more money. And so part of our conversation is, how did she come back home to herself? How did she find her balance? How does she continue to do that? So we go behind the scenes a little bit of her business. And she shares what she's had to overcome internally to continue to grow her business, to stay loose, to allow herself to tap into those creative ideas, which have been the heart of what helped her grow and have impact. So this episode is for any one of you who have ever felt anxious or overwhelmed, or like me, stuck before you could take action, where the way forward hasn't always seemed clear. I think you're going to get a lot of inspiration from this conversation, and I can't wait for you to hear it. As always, I'm so glad you're here. Thank you. And if you know anyone that would benefit from this conversation, please share it. Lily, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me. It's so great to have you here. I have been observing you, sharing you. I think it was right around 2020 during the pandemic that I started to appreciate and see you on TikTok when I Full disclosure. Yes, I like TikTok. And I just got so personally impacted by the way in which you were sharing what can be considered like a profound sort of more spiritual understanding, but you were connecting that to anxiety in such a panic attacks and nervous system in such a beautiful, simple way that I've just been an admirer of your work for a long time. So thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you. That means so much to me. Now I think I can receive that, but I used to feel very embarrassed when somebody that I might look up to, or somebody in the kind of 3 principles conversation, I'd kind of cringe. But now I am proud, and I love sharing on social media. It's something that's really fun for me, and so thank you. I'm kind of have embraced my presence on social media.
Yeah. Well, we're going to talk more about that because as you and I were just touching on a few things prior to hitting record, I'm really excited to hear you talk about your business and what that experience has been for you. But I thought we'd start first with you're the founder of Peace from Within, which has a beautiful community with it. It's also your website and your work and your handle on all the socials. But I'm wondering if you could share, the title of this podcast is The Innerverse of Business and Life. So that connection between the within, between our inner world and our outer world, is something that we both are aligned in, knowing there's a beautiful, powerful connection. And I'm wondering if you could share What was it that you saw? What did you first glimpse in this direction around peace from within that supported you and helped you in your own life and with your own anxiety?
I always identified as an anxious person, but it didn't impact my life in a huge way until, I mean, I'm sure it did, but it until it really woke me up when I had a panic attack and I was driving on the freeway. And then I took my mental health even more seriously. My panic attack, I felt like I was like losing my mind. Everything got really revved up from a medication and my thoughts were spinning. And I just had a very innocent misunderstanding of what was going on and an innocent overreaction. And I was a school psychologist at the time. And um, I love self help in a way, or I don't know what the right wording is, but so I just dove into it even more because I thought the panic attack for me was actually the start of what if I lost my mind. And so I kind of then felt that I was even more separate. I would see other people like my husband at the time, or say my parents or anybody, and I'd be like, well, there's them. And I'm very anxious. And then I was like, and also I'm on the verge of like maybe something more than anxiety. So I got to be really serious about this. So it was partially an interest, but also like I got to get everything together or I could just lose my mind and be in a mental hospital. And I thought if I did, it was this also misunderstanding that I could kind of reach some point of mental illness that would be of no return. I couldn't be a school psychologist. I couldn't be a mom. So I, would meditate and then take that to the nth degree of I'm going to become certified to teach meditation in schools and mindfulness in schools. And I'm going to take more courses and more cognitive behavioral therapy and even eat. I had a very innocent but unhealthy obsession with health, like mental health and physical health, and trying to eat in the quote unquote cleanest way possible. And all of this was like, some things that could be great, sure, to like enjoy cooking or going to the farmer's market or meditating. But like the spirit that I was doing it in was also just really ramped up. And so there was points where I'd make all my own cleaning products, all my own beauty products. I bought everything from organic from the farmer's market, but I'd also meditate and do hypnosis and like, have a really long morning routine and a really long evening routine. And there's a lot of fear in there. Fear that if I didn't feel like I could just relax. My husband at the time would, I felt like a lot of couples, you kind of chill at the end of the night and watch a show. And I was really afraid of the blue light from the TV or staying up too late. But then I'd be like, well, I'm a horrible wife and I'm not connecting. But if I don't do this, I could just go crazy. And so after my panic attack, there was 7 years where I was really working really hard. And I had a year where I didn't drive on the freeway. I rode my bike to work a lot and people drove me. And then I did a lot of cognitive behavioral therapy and I got back on, but I was like white knuckling it. I did a long drive from LA to San Francisco with my kids to get a dog. And I feel like it took years off me and grayed me because I was like doing all my techniques and so I was doing stuff, but I was like, I'm still really uncomfortable and I'm still really anxious. Um, and that led me just to kind of keep searching. And I came across Sari Taylor, and she introduced me to the three principles understanding in the most simple way. And I heard it. I saw that I was innocently overcomplicating it. I saw that there was less for me to do. And just in a totally curious way, I was like, is this? I thought in a way it was another technique, but I was willing to try it because I was like, I'm really tired.
Yeah.
And everything I'm doing is not really working. I'm still having panic attacks driving. And it just slowly changed my life. I remember thinking, why isn't this taught in graduate school? Why didn't any, I taught this, and it really made sense because the breath work, the grounding techniques, everything I was taught in graduate school and also by my therapist, I always had this like, what's wrong with me? Why isn't it working? I'm doing it right. And I would then do it more. And then coming into the conversation, I was like, oh my gosh. And so when it just slowly started to change my life, I like wanted to scream it from the rooftops. And I worked with students and I did start incorporating it, but there was this drive. I was like, I want all the anxious adults to know this. And so I'll wrap up my story. I worked in person as a school psychologist. And so I always thought I needed to somehow share this and transition and get a PhD or how is this going to work? And then when the pandemic started and there was more people online and I was also going through a divorce, I signed, I was like, I'm just going to do an online kind of live group with it and start sharing as a coach. And that's how it started. Was I think a kind of a perfect opportunity where a lot of people, were online. I had more time to create something, and also actually a little push financially. I was living with my parents, and it just was all perfect at getting over the doubts. I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to launch it. So that's how it
Yeah,
started.
I can really appreciate that place where we're not doing well, either your panic attack on the bridge and then the anxiety and the fear of what was happening to your mind kind of elevating. I know that I traveled globally quite often in my work. And after a trip around 2014, I came back and something was wrong. I was sick and I got really rigid around trying to figure that out. And then it was stomach issues. So I was eliminating more and more and more food, and I was getting more and more and more controlling. And as I got more and more vigilant and rigid, I was putting on more weight. Like it was the most bizarre sort of thing happening and no amount of thinking it. But I was doing like you. I was doing all the things. And then one day I remember just sitting outside somewhere and just thinking, it can't be this. Like there is no freedom inside of me. And I just knew like every part of my being in that moment wanted to be free, and I knew I was not free, and I knew that this direction as intensely as I was going, as diligent as I was being, was not the direction of freedom and healing. And so I remember just like literally having the thought, like, what would it be like to not be thinking about this, like to not have my health on my mind, to not have my behavior on my mind so much. So I can really resonate with what you're saying. So if it's not that, what is it? What gave you the freedom? What was it that you saw? I heard the less effort, but can you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah. One big insight that I saw was that my wisdom got me through every panic attack. And so I saw the first panic attack and kind of all the other panic attacks in a new light. Before I had thought, some part of me felt shame and then fear, and so I'd scan and think, and I felt it in my bones that, like, wait, I couldn't plan. I had no idea that I was going to have that experience, a panic attack, and I got through it. I pulled off the freeway, and I called my mom, and I called my psychiatrist. And so that was one thing that was like, I don't think I have to think about this or plan or try to prevent it. So that was like one thing. And I saw that. And then another one was that I didn't have to take my thinking so seriously. And they all kind of work together. But also I was just very curious. And so I remember driving and then being aware of my little mind kind of saying, still scanning. I was still like, had my habit. I would often try to scan, or not try to scan. I just was on guard. For one of the early symptoms used to be that like my forearms would feel tingly. So I remember driving to work, but with curiosity and still having the same thoughts, like my thoughts kind of racing. How are your arms feeling? But not taking it all so seriously. Like before, it felt like the word of God in a way. Like, so I just had a bit of distance that it didn't have to seem so serious, even though I was aware of my forearms or my racing thoughts. And so that was one thing. And then also that my thoughts flowed all on their own. And before I would, pull over and I would start to do, tapping and emotional freedom technique. And so I thought there was more for me to do. So it was kind of, I can really so visually remember being aware of that and then thinking, do my thoughts really flow on their own? Are they not, I don't have to take them so seriously, and they just flow, and just totally being curious. And so I'd have the same kind of thoughts and scanning, and I didn't take it so seriously. I didn't think there was, or I didn't do anything. And then I would have a whole new thought. And it just changed my life, because before I would have to pull over And so I'd be driving and I still would have a bit of an anxious experience. And then I'd have a new thought and I'd be like, I can't believe it. Like I didn't pull over. So that's what I started to see. Another also huge thing. So a huge fear of mine was if I didn't catch this early, um, I could panic and lose my mind and go end up in a mental hospital. And then Sari Taylor had shared her story that her anxiety got to a point where she did go to a mental hospital. And she got out and she was a mom and a psychotherapist. And the same with Nicola Bird. So Sari and Nicola, I looked up to them and they had my biggest fear come true. They both went to a mental hospital. And so that just instantly was like poof to my biggest fear because they continued to be moms and psychotherapists.
Yeah.
And so it was like I saw there was no point of no return. So that alone, I'd also hadn't really heard, I know I'm saying a lot, but before meeting Sari, and then I didn't meet Nicola in person, but listening to her podcast and doing her programs, I'd never met anybody that experienced anxiety in the way that I did. So I really, which I think is so common, we think we're the worst off and I'm the exception. And so these women that look like I would trade places with them, they look fabulous. So it's like, well, what do I have to fear? I'm not different than them. So stopped taking myself and my anxiety so personally and so seriously. And that's what I started to see, that there's not a point of no return. We're designed to return to balance and we do it all on our own. And so I also started to like move in a new direction where the more I did, it seemed like the more anxious I'd get. And I'd be like, ah. And then this way, it was like the less I did, the more my thinking started to settle, my physical symptoms started to fall away. So I got some, even though it took a while for some of my physical symptoms to go, I got like some positive reinforcement
Yeah.
because I started to just feel settled for the first time in like 7 years. And I was like, there's something to this.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's great. And I think what I hear and what you're saying is that distance to experience, like in a way, we we see that we're in an experience. We see the anxiety or the running thoughts, and where before you were afraid of them or you thought they were telling you something ultimately about your health and your mental health, you now see them as thoughts, and those thoughts create an experience inside of us. They create, the heart rate increase and all those other things. And yet to have that distance, even just a little bit, it's a great example of you can be in an experience without an experience having you. And that little bit of distance is well-being and allows the thought to move on. I think that's really great. And so as you've evolved and you started to deepen your own understanding of how the mind works, and then that, the innate nature of resilience and well-being, as you started to see more and more for yourself there, how did that inform the way you worked with people?
Some of it gave me more, in a way, permission to just be me because as a school psychologist, some of what I knew or learned with the principles I was already doing. Like as a school psychologist, a lot of stuff is supposed to be evidence-based and goal-oriented. And while I still had that in mind, I couldn't help but be me and show up and just listen and be present and be, because other stuff would feel, and I always saw every student and every child fresh and with innate health. And so I remember, even if somebody well-meaning would give me a rundown of a student, I would like throw it out, and I just want to come up and show up, and each time with unconditional positive regard and love and just presence and showing up to what is, and kind of having my own guidance that way. So when I was it like oh, it just spoke to me more. So as a school psychologist, and then I really was like, oh, I want to share this. And so there's a Spark curriculum, which is an evidence-based curriculum that you can use in schools. And so I got my district to actually get it, and also the school social worker. So I kind of started sharing it in that way. But I still felt this, you know, and I've, as a school psychologist, everybody is different districts are different, but a lot of it is counseling and crisis. And I've loved counseling, you know, and that's kind of like coaching but it's, you know, therapy. I just love connecting. I love and talking about everything and anything, you know. And so I think some of that is just my natural ability to listen without judgment. I think all of my friends starting since middle school would feel like they could tell me anything. And I worked my intern year in a high school. And so kids talked about sex and thoughts. And so some of it was just talking about thoughts, which maybe could be labeled, I didn't even know the word intrusive thoughts, but like seeing the human experience. And I feel like I'm getting off topic, but so it didn't, I don't know if it totally changed my work as a school psychologist in the counseling setting, but I had already been a bit disillusioned with the assessment process. I don't know if this is the route you wanted to take. We can let it go, but you know, a diagnosis. And so I just felt very ready to
Yeah.
to transition because while I love working with kids, I had worked with kids even before being a school psychologist. I was a nanny and worked in preschools, and I love children, but especially having my own children too, and them getting older and being an adult who experienced very debilitating anxiety and panic. And really, right before I found the three principles, I was looking into collecting disability, where there's no shame in that, but it was really like it was very hard for me to get to work, and I just felt like I really wanted adults to know this. And so that's where it changed the nature of my career. And then I just felt such a calling. Like I just was like, I need the adults to know this too.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it sounds like you mentioned earlier, at the point of the divorce and moving in with your parents, and then this sort of new realization and wanting to broaden your audience, that's when you started to move in the direction of coach and having your own business and doing, the videos. Is that right? I have that timing right?
Yeah, it was exactly. I came into the three principles conversation in April or May of 2018, and then just had my own insights, and then yeah, Spark curriculum, and then 2020. It was the summer. It was like July. I knew what I wanted to share. I knew I wanted to share something in this area, and I took a course called Course from Scratch, and it was like 8 weeks to launch your live, and I put it on a PayPal credit card. Actually, it was like $1,700.
Yeah.
I thought I'm going to follow this to a T. It was like you do all this work, 8 weeks, and you launch your group. And I was like, you know what? If I can just make back this money, that will be a win, and it might change my life. And it was like I set to launch and do my first group September 1st, and I followed almost all of her instructions. Just to, you write your own thing, but and it was the perfect time because it was the pandemic. So my kids, we were not going anywhere. And I wasn't driving them to summer camps. We were just at home. And so that's what set me on it. And there was a bit of a financial push because that was a lot of money. And it still is. But especially then, I was like, well, I really want to pay this off before interest starts to
Yeah.
come. I had 6 months interest free to pay off the money.
And so what did it take internally for you to make that leap and just begin? I know there are a lot of people out there that in their businesses or their work, they want to step into something new, or they want to create content even, which is what you were doing. But what had to shift inside of you to do that?
Yeah, it was so I put the thing on a PayPal credit card, and I said, okay, I'm going to follow every step of hers. And it's doing it all. And then it got to the one thing was, now you're going to send a text to everybody in your phone saying, I'm launching a new business. Can I put you on my email list? And I got there and I thought, I don't want anybody that I know to know this. This is horrible. I want to do this in
Yeah.
secret. But then I thought, well, I made the commitment and I'm going to do it. And I got over myself because I had made that commitment. So that was like a first step. And I just felt I sort of wanted to really not do it. So I don't think I did it for the first day. And then I thought, no, I made this commitment to give it my all. and let me just see. And so I really did text almost every single person and asked them if I could put them on my email list or whatever she had recommended. And it was really painful at points, you know. And then some of it was she had recommended you also do all of these like interviews to get what your client would be. So I just followed her steps and I was really uncomfortable. But then people from high school reached out to me and people from my old jobs and people from CrossFit. So I got a really great response. And then it was like, okay, now you're going to launch your Instagram. And I was like, but I thought, well, I'm doing this to just see if I can change my life. You know, part of it was I wanted to share, but also would this changed my life and my kids' life. And I really didn't even like photos of myself. I hated it. So I remember being really uncomfortable. My boyfriend took a photo and like kind of doing my first post and actually like getting a pretty good response from my friends and family. And then the one thing that she had said, the woman, Danielle Leslie, who had the course, was like, here's how you're going to. I diverged when she told me how to or recommended what to do with Instagram. It was like, you're going to go to these things and then DM people. And I thought I followed everything up until here, but I can't DM people. I send them a direct message being like, are you? I was like, it was everything before that. I felt ready to take the leap and trust her. But at that point, I had this knowing if people, for me, what felt like if people are going to want to work with me, they're going to want to work with me. And, you know, what's interesting, she had said something that was very helpful, you know, that you might be thinking, there are so many anxiety coaches or therapists.
Yeah.
What's going to make me different? And she said, you're going to have your culture ad. And I remember being like, what is that? I don't like what makes me different. And I didn't know until I started sharing. I had no idea. I didn't know that what makes me unique makes me me, if that makes sense. So I couldn't, I just shared. And actually that's when, so I was very uncomfortable with just a static photo and how, which I'm more comfortable with now on Instagram. But my daughter was the one who said, what about TikTok? And so I started watching TikTok videos and literally just laughing so much. And then an idea came to me. And so it was like beyond my thinking. You know, with Instagram, I had a lot of thinking and I'd be like, I can't look at myself and thinking about the posts and something about TikTok, just an idea would come to me and I'd do it. I'd make a little video. And that's where I got really, really comfortable with me being me. And then more ideas would come and more kind of positive reaction. And, and so that's, I could go more in that direction.
Yeah, well, what I love about that is a couple things I want to highlight and speak into is one is that what you landed on, what you just keep coming back to is I committed to this, I'm just going to follow directions, right? Like in a way that was all right, no, I said yes to this. I want to pay it back. What else have I got? And it sounds funny, but it really is so often, sometimes that's enough to carry us. Like there's no back doors. I said, I'm going to follow this. So that's what I'm doing. Taking outcome off my mind, doing my best to handle the nerves about people's opinions. Like we all get that. I haven't met anyone around the world yet that doesn't have moments of self-consciousness or questioning, right? So I think that in a way, what's so important around what you're saying is we don't have to overcome those first. I think so often it looks like I'll start when I feel more confident. Yet you don't need confidence to start. You just start, right? You can do it in a feeling of anxiousness and still in uncertainty, or people wait for like some penny to drop and some big insight or revelation to come in before they begin. And it's like, no, just engage. I think that is such a powerful, like if you're wanting to move in the world in a different way, play with your creativity, write something, try a business, that what you just spoke to, one of the things you just spoke to, I think is a game changer, just really valuable.
Yeah. Well, because it evolved. I had no idea what made me unique or what would connect with people. I didn't know that it was intrusive thoughts or derealization, which I had no idea even that was what I was experiencing until after, or some like health obsessions or some OCD or like the ways that felt weird and unique to me. Like I didn't know that that was relatable, or that was, I don't know if now I've like lost it with the with trying to put it into form, but I didn't know until I started making videos, and truly it was beyond the intellect. Like when I thought about it, it was like I fell into watching TikTok, and that was just one way, scrolling with nothing on my mind. And sometimes it would be, you know, a trending sound or song, or and these creative ideas, but I couldn't think about it. I couldn't pre-plan it. And sometimes I would put the intention out there, because in the beginning I did do easy stuff that didn't totally feel aligned, like this is health anxiety. And then I remember very early on being like, how do I share the principles without, in the most simple way possible? How do I point people to innate health in the most simple way possible? But I couldn't have thought it with my intellect.
Yeah.
Like there was, and so I'd go into this no thinking, and either I'd just be in my day and I'd get an idea. Often I'd be like, oh, here's my idea of how I want to say this. Or I'd be scrolling, or I'd hear a song. But it truly like came in a creative way. And I had no idea before I started making videos. I had no idea. I had no plan about that. Like it really just, and then it just continued to evolve, but I had no idea. That's
Yeah,
what,
that's amazing. And to now have almost 500,000 on TikTok and a couple 100,000 on Instagram and all of that, I think is, I love what you're saying, because I know for myself, I can get too strategic and then all the is gone out of me. And then I'm like, it's dull and I'm not even interested anymore. Right. Where it's like, no, if we just see that, you spoke to it, take action. And in the taking action, it's like that muscle of creativity and openness just, it opens a doorway somehow, and then you see it and you get more willing to play with it and engage with it, versus again trying to get the plan ahead of time perfectly before you move. And I really love what you said about, you didn't know what made you unique until you started sharing the videos. Then way people respond, I mean, that's it, right? Like we're in relational work, and so much of what we share, and then people will show us, that was amazing. Oh, I did. Me too. And then that is what helps us also.
yes, exactly. It was the feedback that I was getting. I remember very early on, I did a video on intrusive thoughts. And it was because without even, I didn't know that that was a word that people used for it, but it was something, a topic of conversation that came up all the time as a school psychologist. And without even having, nobody taught me it, you know. And there was a lot I learned with the principles that was helpful for me. But as a school psychologist talking to people, I could, you know, and when I shared that just about thoughts, the response I got, people would say, I wanted to end my life before I saw you talk about that. Oh my gosh, I'd never heard, because as a school psychologist, people talked about harm thoughts, sexual thoughts, all these types of things that like isn't talked about. And so I remember when I had this idea, and I didn't want to put the sex one in there because I thought, what if people, and then I had this thought, well, if I don't, who will? Which I know there's so many people that will, but I was willing to get some negative feedback because it felt like the relief that I would see when I would talk to my students, when they would bring something up with me, death, sex, like, you know, it was like, oh my God, like such a big burden off. And I thought, this is too important. I'm willing to risk being misunderstood. And the response that I got was overwhelming. Like in the beginning, I would screenshot the comments because I've never been so fulfilled. And I know maybe it's not good to be fulfilled from something, but like more
Yes,
fulfilled as a school
yeah,
psychologist.
yeah, yeah,
I literally thought I could die now. And I feel like my purpose on this earth has, I've fulfilled my purpose,
yeah.
as it felt, it was a short video, it was free, and it was thousands and thousands and thousands of comments of people saying, this saved my life, this changed
Wow.
everything, I don't want to die. And so that feedback really, you know, was like infused my inspiration and my creativity and wanting to open up. And when I was also really struggling with anxiety, And I felt so strange. I'd never heard anybody talk about, would have like dissociation or feel like I was losing my mind, and I couldn't put words to it. So I always felt like, and then being on the other side, I would talk about what it felt like. And people would say, that's it, that's it. Oh my gosh. And so it was really like a, I don't know if this is the right word, like a symbiotic relationship in a way, because people would give me great feedback. They'd say,
Yeah.
oh, I could never put into words.
Yeah.
Or somebody would say, I'm showing this to my therapist. Or a therapist would say, oh, this is it. I showed this to my client. And it was like, oh, people are liking this. And
Mm.
so I would open up my mind more and more to either, and it was truly like, it wasn't my brain, it wasn't my thinking that would have this, oh, here's the way I want to describe what it felt like. Um,
Mm.
and I would do it. And sometimes people would misunderstand me, and that was also okay. It's been such a huge portal for me in so many ways. One, loving how I look. I used to hate how I looked. And so I think when I'd see me, I'd be disappointed because I would continue not see a gorgeous model. And I like, but then I saw me, and seeing me also in a video, and then also getting over myself, because if I always tried to look good, I'd never make content.
Yeah.
And also I didn't want people, I was also very hesitant of men, and I didn't want to work with somebody. It was like, so, but so there were so many ways of just getting over myself,
Mm.
showing up, making videos. Some would land and some would go viral. And sometimes people would leave me mean comments, and it would hurt, and it would really hurt. It was really like, or I'd be really afraid. I didn't want any of my friends or my family, but they all followed me because I had originally told everybody,
Yeah.
here,
Yeah.
follow my new business.
Too late now, right?
So it was, I mean, I could go on and on in so many different ways about what a portal for my own expansion it has
Yeah,
been.
I'd love to. I think that's brilliant and ultimately what is so helpful because I too, my business, my work with others, the way I've reinvented, not quite, or tried new things, like all of that has been a vehicle for more aliveness, more evolving myself, more understanding of who I am at my core. I think that's a beautiful exploration and I'd love to go there more. And I am curious, like, because I hear you, you're saying, like, listen, I felt maybe self conscious. I got my feelings hurt. I was afraid of what people thought. It was being vulnerable, felt scary. Like, you've mentioned all those things. So, yeah, what would you say to someone that has this desire to have greater impact? And part of that maybe requires the visibility or speaking their truth, regardless of, how their friends or family or strangers will feel.
Yeah. Well, the first thing that came to me is different than what I did. But I remember I heard somebody, Amy McNee, who I love, I think she's so great. She'd say, block your friends and family in the beginning.
Yeah,
Like,
I've heard that too. Yeah.
but I didn't, but actually things always are different than how we imagine them they might be. So the feedback that I've gotten from my friends and my family has been overwhelmingly positive. And I would hear from friends of friends, oh, so and so said they followed you in high school. And even I used to have a lot of thinking even about anybody in the three principles. Like, I had so much embarrassment because what I share is often very light and silly. But I want to say, what would I say to people? I mean, you can start anyway. If you are like, I want to do this and I don't want my friends and family, I'm not telling anybody. And if that would give you more freedom, great. And then like, have fun with it if you want to, because you can, there's so many different ways to share. It could be a blog, it can be YouTube, it doesn't have to be Instagram or TikTok or anything. Do what feels fun to you, and then it might change. Like, that's why TikTok felt very fun for me. It was fun, it was easy. And now I love making posts on Instagram, and actually I'll ebb and flow. Like, I've had so much more ideas for just a static video or making carousels on Canva. And I haven't had as much flow sometimes with videos, but that comes back. And so often when you start, I think having fun with it, and what is fun? Is it fun to write a blog? Is it fun to film a video? And there's also so many ways to make videos. It can be a talking video. And for me, I had a lot of fun making very short videos using a trending sound, that was like
Yeah.
a 5-second audio or a 10-second audio. And then I'd have more ideas. And so there's just so many, there's infinite ways. You might just write. There's so many ways to share in a way that might feel good to you.
Yeah. And that piece, like, I think coming back to you can handle it. Like, if we really knew and we remember that we can handle the ups and downs, like, ultimately, like, you could handle driving across the bridge and feeling some anxiety at the same time. You could handle oh gosh, what are my colleagues and peers going to think about me talking about sex or being in a swimsuit? Like, like, we can all, but yet you have this creative nudge to do that. And so I think it's like this, yes, do we really, like, when we know we're okay no matter what? And sometimes, by the way, we don't know that until we do it.
Yes. Yeah. And this is a funny direction, but like I had so many weird things happen with Instagram. Right before I got 25K, my Instagram got hacked and held at ransom. And
Gosh.
I know, and it was so weird. And I got it back though, but I had to like pay another hacker. And then another time, my account got banned and I lost it for 6 weeks, which supposedly, if you don't get it back, it was just gone. And then it was funny, like one time when I had the flu and I was in bed and I thought, well, so I started a whole new account and another video went viral and that one was already growing. So I just was very loose of like, let me look up and I just did a bunch of other stuff and then I got it back. And then something else happened. And so it kind of helped me hold it very lightly,
Yeah.
where, yeah, I have 416K on TikTok. But when there was the ban, a lot of people were like, what are your thoughts about it? I wasn't bothered at all. And some of it is because I've had these funny experiences with Instagram where it would go. And then at one point, when they were early time paying for reels, how well a video on Instagram did, I made so much money. But it was like, and then that would all dissolve. And it was this one time my daughter wanted to go to camp, this very expensive art camp, which proved to be well because she's off to art school.
Nice. Oh,
Had a
that's great.
Yeah, and I had a video that went viral on TikTok that I didn't know would, but it was very like controversial. People didn't like it, some people. And I'd never posted on Instagram because Instagram I thought would get more hate. But then when I was getting paid for reels and I wanted to send her to camp, I'm like, I will post this video now. And I posted, I made almost $10,000, but I got so
Wow.
much hate. People, and the rule was to earn the money from reels, you had to keep it up for 60 or 90 days. I got hateful comments and DMs. And so I just had to stop going on it
Yeah.
because people would send me really mean messages, like even though it was about a panic attack when I called my ex-husband for help, but people were very mad, some people. But it was so like there were so many opportunities to be light about it and to hold on to how not serious it was and how it would change, like the fact that I could get my account hacked and then lose it and then make $10,000 off of a video, but it was like, I don't know the right words, but it was like, hold this all lightly and have fun.
Yeah.
Don't be too serious and roll and flow with it. And so even when there's been the TikTok bans, and I'm really great at making content. And so if TikTok falls away or Instagram, like I'll adapt. If I'm meant to be on another social media platform, I won't have to plan for it.
Yeah, because what you take with you is really what you said earlier, like what the TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, like those are just different vehicles, but where the real like source of creativity is inside of you. Your knowledge of what you want to share and the insights you've had in your work with clients, and that's inside of you. And so I think that what you like, had this sort of really amazing relationship to those vehicles. Cause I know I've had clients, I've seen where, something happens to their account and that is, like feels like the end of the world. And it can be a big financial hit for people. So I don't want to under value that. But what you're saying, again, I think if people are listening, is where the real money is, right? Is that no matter what happens, that the creative resolution and ideas and the source of where our creative ideas come from, where the clients ultimately come from, is inside of us. And that's wherever we are. So yes, well, getting Instagram ransom hijacked, all that is not fun and is a pain in the, what. I think you're onto something. And I've seen that with really successful entrepreneurs, that there is a way that they're able to bounce back and they just keep going, and I think that agility is really powerful. And what you're saying about it's in you, that's great. And so, as I'm curious now, there's a lot out there around nervous system regulation and executive dysfunction and, solopreneurs. I saw something last year that the rate of solopreneurs was growing at like 300 times the rate. And people are more and more interested in having agency and creating their own businesses. So I just am curious, like, what's your thought or what around the connection to what does the nervous system have to do with anything? And, what if I really want to do this, but I've been diagnosed ADHD or I have executive dysfunction? What would you say for those folks?
So I think if you have a diagnosis of ADHD, I think, at least as me, as somebody who has a diagnosis, everybody experiences it differently, but I feel like you have an advantage because but potentially, like, so many of us with ADHD have a fast moving brain. And I had met with Shaw and Aaron, who do the 3P UK conference a couple months ago, many months ago, when I had said, "Oh, I'll help you with your marketing." We had a meeting and then we hung up. It couldn't stop the flow of ideas that I had, and I'm like, and so some of that I think is I have so many ideas. I have such a fast moving brain, and especially like being neurodivergent, if we want to have a label. The three principles coaching business can be an area of hyper focus for me. It's a huge, huge area of interest. One is the three principles. I can hyper focus on that, which has its good and its bad, and using my feelings as a guide. Also, business. It can be a huge area of a huge dopamine hit for me, growing my business. Like I can have extreme focus and almost an obsession, which sometimes, which I learned pretty early on with the three principles. Sometimes it was like, slow it down too much. So like, but when you know yourself and you being in this conversation, especially knowing when I'm going too fast and furious, when I'm getting obsessive, it doesn't feel good. There's nothing wrong with that. But using my feelings as a guide and knowing that. So this was, I don't know if this is the direction we want to go in, but I also got into the habit of having a drink at the end of the night during the pandemic and when I was starting my business, because I would be so revved up and very innocently would get into a habit of obsessively thinking about my business and social media and growing, that it felt like my brain couldn't, the momentum couldn't stop. And I would, like many people, at home during the pandemic, but I would just have a drink at night. And it felt like my brain was like, okay, cool. So we're not thinking about work anymore. But I also didn't like that habit. And it took me a little bit to see that. I remember sitting in the bath kind of more intentionally not indulging in that habit and having a conversation with myself and saying, I really want to drink because I just want to, um, I want to stop thinking about work. And I heard my, whatever, I might say my wisdom said, we can do that for you. And I was like, the feeling of closing down shop, because as someone who works from home and I can work for myself, I do have the potential. And it's still something I'm continue to see more and more. For me, at least, my flavor of ADHD or neurodivergent can be sometimes I obsessively think about work and growing my business and my clients. And I'm seeing more and more that I don't need to think so much. I think thinking has served me well for my whole life. And so it's like I have a habit of thinking a lot. And some of the thinking, it seems like this grew my business. That's a multi six-figure business and has changed my family's life. And wrapping up what I'm saying, it doesn't feel good to think as much as I think. And I know that my business can continue to be successful and can be even more successful the less I have on my mind. And it seemed like this past year, it's been a really big lesson, because the more successful this is the most successful it's been, and the most anxious I felt about my business. And luckily, I know what I know. And I remember saying it to one of my good friends, and she said, "You have anxiety about your anxiety business." And just laughing, like we were on a hike and just laughing and being light about it. And so being me, and someone who I guess is neurodivergent and has a fast moving brain, and it's just been a learning less, like, it just kind of shines a light on, here, there's more for you to see, and there's less for you to do, and it's safe not to think so much. And I'm not exactly where I know I'll be, but I'm grateful for that opportunity. I don't know if that answered it.
Yeah, I mean, just even as you speak into that, I feel my body relaxing, as somebody that can relate to being an overthinker and then getting the dopamine hits from my creativity around my business and what my business could be and loving what I do. And then I'm single right now, so there's plenty of time, to do that. But I really love what you said when you were, in the tub. It's like, oh, my brain actually wants to like close the laptop, and it's like we can feel that. And then anxious thought tells us, I don't know how, or I can't do that. I can't stop it. But it's anxious thought, end of story. That's it. And so leaning into that feeling of the body relaxing. And I appreciate what you're saying too. It's like the way we know we're sort of overextending is our body, it won't feel good. It won't feel good. And so that relationship to less on our mind really being a pathway to resilience and creativity. Like you said earlier, it just came. Things would come to me no matter what I was doing. That's how the brain works. That's how it works. So the less we're ramping up our thinking, the more open we are, those we have access, we're available even more in a felt way to those things.
Yes. Yeah. And I think when I was first starting out my business, it was like, oh my God, this is so fun. This is so not serious. Let me just see and let me grow. And
Yeah.
then suddenly,
Yes.
well, now my business is a thing, and it's,
Yeah.
but I want to hold on to it. What if it falls apart? But I'm grateful that I had this awareness, because some of it I would tell my parents, because it's like still feels, even though at 43, nice for my parents to be so proud of me. And then a couple months ago, I said to my mom, because I would sometimes tell them how much money I'm making. And then, oh, wow. And then I said to my mom, if I don't make this much money, and it sounds so embarrassing in a way, you'll still love me, right? And you'll still be proud of me. She's like, of course. Because part of it was like, once I did that, it was like, oh my God, now I can't make any less. And I'm so grateful that I know that that doesn't. Also, it's like, am I thinking of my business falling apart, when for the first few years it was just of expansion? And so I'm aware, I'm like onto myself about the illusion of it all, I can be back in, sorry, let me, that I can be right back into the present, and the flow and the hope and the knowing that I'll be okay no matter what. And so, but I still have gotten caught up in this past year. um but I'm so grateful for knowing this, that wasn't, I knew what was going on.
Yeah. Yeah.
and and it has been just a like a huge portal for me to deepen my understanding and to learn more. And I feel like I am so much slower than I have been. But so it's like, yeah, business, it's been I mean, more than I ever dreamed, in so many ways, of like, a lifelong learner, and I'm learning really in this direction, or in, I don't know what the wording is.
Yeah. Well, and I think we're hungry. People are hungry to let go of the mental construct that the only way to be successful is to be exhausted or stressed or pressured all the time, or that it's all up to your thinking, so you got to hold a grip. And really, more and more science is backing it. Your story backs that. No, no, like we can trust, we can let go. And by letting go more, we actually have more reservoir available to us for the things we need.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really beautiful. Well, I have loved this conversation, and I feel like you and I could probably talk for hours just on all the ways business gives us a chance to see erratic thought. Is that the word you used before? Like, yeah, the thoughts that come in that just look like we should take them seriously. But when you just say, well, who said who? What does that have to do with anything? Like you just start to see it and let it like move on. Next thought. But also that the source of everything we need to grow, to problem solve, to create, to restore, rejuvenate, and all come back home is within. And I just want to give you, as we kind of come towards the end of our time, an opportunity. Is there anything present that you'd like to share or say?
When I just got quiet, this sounds funny because the critical part of me is like, business is really fun. Like, it was just like, I'm so grateful. I'm grateful to have this conversation. I think you're somebody that I've looked up to. And so part of me is like, I still can't believe that like anybody would want to talk to me. But as you said, what do I want people to know? I guess I'm like, life is really fun and business can be part of it. And it is fun and we can't lose at it. We can't kind of like, I don't know who first said it to me, or was it Michael? Like, if we know we're playing with the house's money.
Yeah.
I guess it's like, that feels really nice to me when I get serious about anything. And if I get serious about my business, I'm actually grateful that I can feel that and it can invite me to loosen up and have fun. And this has been a fun conversation. And sometimes, look, when I first started out, I would talk to people. I've worked with people in 36 countries. And I'm like,
Amazing.
how is this life? How is this so much fun?
Yeah.
And so I'm grateful to remember that, because
Yeah.
I'm grateful that the seriousness and tension does wake me up and I get to remember how fun it can be.
Yeah.
It really is.
Well, and I really believe that often our heart's desire is just on the other side of that uncomfortable feeling, or fun is on the other side of just that uncomfortable feeling. And so your story is just such a great example of we can do it anyway, and the impact you've been able to have, which I know for so many of us is really meaningful. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And we'll direct everybody to your community and to Instagram and TikTok for as long as it's around, I guess, right? And I'm really curious to see where you continue to go and grow, Lily. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
As always, thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this podcast, it would mean a lot to us if you could take a moment to first subscribe and follow wherever you like to listen to podcasts. Hitting the follow button means you'll never miss a show. All you have to do is hit the plus sign in the upper right-hand corner or click on follow. While you're there, if you like what you're hearing, we'd appreciate you taking a moment to give us a shout out and review. Most importantly, however, if you know anyone that would benefit from this episode, please pass it along. And finally, if you'd like to learn more about my work, Interverse Academy, or upcoming events, you can check out my website at barbarapatterson.com. You'll find some great resources, classes, and videos, and a lot more. Thank you again for being here. See you next time.